There are many different types of bankruptcy, but there are really three main types that an individual or a business would be interested in doing. The Chapter 7 is sort of the most basic type of bankruptcy. It is a liquidation. Essentially, a Chapter 7 can be filed by an individual or a business, but if a business files a Chapter 7, that really means that they're done. They're not going to reorganize. The business is not going to continue to provide any goods or services after the bankruptcy. A Chapter 7 is a pretty quick and simple process. You have a trustee, so as soon as you file, the trustee has to assess what is your exempt property, and this could be things like a house, a car, tools of the trade, certain home furnishings and personal property. And then the trustee also has to determine if you have any other property, that is not exempt. And that trustee takes the non-exempt property, sells it, and then uses those funds to pay your debts. A Chapter 7 is quick. It's usually over in about 6 months. You don't retain as much property because you are giving the trustee the ability to take your non-exempt property, sell it, and then use that money to pay creditors. There is something in a Chapter 7 called a means test, and that determines if an individual actually qualifies to file a Chapter 7. And that's why, part of why it's really important to talk to an attorney, because an attorney can take a look at your assets and your liabilities and figure out if you qualify under the means test. The means test basically looks at your income over the 6 months prior to filing bankruptcy and how you measure up to the median income in your state. But it's a little more complicated than that, and that it does factor in certain amounts of assets and liabilities. So that's your basic Chapter 7. A Chapter 13 is often called the wage earner bankruptcy. It is only for individuals, and it is for individuals who have regular income, hence the name of wage earner bankruptcy. A Chapter 13 essentially allows you to keep more of your property. You still have a trustee, and you still sort of have this division between the exempt property and the non-exempt property, but you can keep more of your non-exempt property because it allows you to restructure certain debts over 3 to 5 years. Now with a 13, because the plans run between 3 to 5 years, you will have both trustee and court supervision over that time. Also with a 13, there are debt limits. So there are limits on the amount of secured and unsecured debt that you can have to fit into a Chapter 13. So again, this is where it's good to talk to an attorney or at least do some research to determine if you fall within the debt limits and therefore qualify for a Chapter 13. With a Chapter 11, that's a reorganization, and that's intended for both individuals and for businesses. It's allowing you to restructure so that you can continue to do business after the bankruptcy, hence reorganization. A lot of individuals don't think about a Chapter 11, but depending on where you fall with the debt limits or the means test in a Chapter 7, a Chapter 11 can be an extremely useful tool for an individual, particularly if you have a lot of investment properties that you want to keep. This will allow you, either as a business or an individual, to restructure your debts and to also even work with your taxing authorities. Your tax debt doesn't go away, but again, to restructure it in a way that you can make the payments. A Chapter 11 also allows you to have a much longer term plan. There is no trustee in a Chapter 11 unless there are allegations of financial misdealings during the bankruptcy. But generally in a Chapter 11, the debtor remains in possession of their property. They continue to run their estate as a business person, and the goal is to help them to reorganize, but because the debts tend to be a little larger, they can do it over a longer period of time. You're not stuck in that 3 to 5 years. You can restructure debt over 10, 20 years if you need to. The discharge can come sooner, though, than the end of that plan, particularly for a business, as long as you make your payments. So the 11 is different in that there's no trustee and there's a lot more control with the debtor, and you get to keep a lot more properties by restructuring that debt.